Hi there, I'm Monica Lindstrom, and this is Legally Speaking. Today we're going to talk about a case in Minnesota. It's State versus Byron Smith. You may have heard about this case, but let me give you a little bit of facts on it. He was the homeowner that killed two teenagers when they broke into his house in the middle of the day, and the state charged him with first-degree murder. Now, you might be saying, well, Monica, it's okay. He can defend his home and himself with deadly force if somebody is breaking into his house. But let me stop you right there. There's some more facts that you need to be aware of. Number one, he says that he was in fear of his life. He lived in fear of his life because his house had been broken into before. So he had an elaborate alarm system with cameras and with audio recordings all over his house. Now here's where it gets interesting. He parked his truck on that day 3 blocks away from his house. He said he wanted to clean out his garage. But instead of keeping his truck just in his driveway or in front of his house, he parked it 3 blocks away, came home, went downstairs into his chair and sat, watched TV, read book, whatever he did. About 30 minutes later, he hears the doorknobs rattle and he hears glass break. He goes upstairs with his gun and realizes that someone is breaking into his house. That someone was a 17-year-old boy. He shoots him. When the boy utters, "Oh," he shoots him again. Clearly, he was incapacitated after the first shot. After he shoots him the second time, he happens to grab a plastic tarp that he had close by, rolls the body onto the tarp, and then takes the body downstairs. Didn't call the cops. Hasn't called the cops yet. He sits down. About 20 minutes later, he hears a female teenager. She's looking for the first guy. She comes into the house. After reloading his gun, he goes up and he shoots her 1 time. Then he shoots her again and kills her. He says it was to make sure she doesn't suffer. It was the killing shot to make sure she didn't suffer. Does he call the cops? Nope, he doesn't. In fact, he calls his neighbor at some point after this, and he doesn't call the cops until the next day. That is why the prosecution is going after him for first-degree murder. Now, there's 2 competing doctrines here, the Castle Doctrine and the Reasonableness Doctrine. Just like in Game of Thrones, we are entitled to defend our castle. We can use deadly force to protect ourselves, our family, and our home. But the Reasonableness Doctrine says that it has to be reasonable. The amount of force you use has to be reasonable. You cannot step over that line. Quick example, 10-year-old breaks into your house, no weapon whatsoever in broad daylight. Not reasonable to shoot him. In this case, the state is saying, okay, you shot them once. Not reasonable to shoot him again, kill him, and essentially execute them. So the jury's going to have to decide. Can he use the Castle Doctrine and say that he was allowed to defend himself with deadly force, because that's allowed in Minnesota and it's allowed here in Arizona? Or will the jury see that he did not act like a reasonable person would and he went over the line and he's guilty of first-degree murder? You can follow me on social media to hear what happens in this case, along with all kinds of other legal cases and issues that happen right here in Arizona and across the country. You can also hear me on Sunday nights here on KTAR from 6 to 8 p.m. on The Agenda with Joe Huizenga. And you can also hear me throughout the week on Mac and Gatos' show. I'm their legal expert and news commentator. So this is Legally Speaking. I'm Monica Lindstrom, and until next time, take care.